At my cousin's 280 guest wedding, under chandeliers bright enough to feel like a staged sunrise, my mother, Caroline Mercer, lifted her glass, flashed that polished Phoenix Society smile she'd perfected over decades, and asked, "So, when's your turn?" No whisper, no grace, just a clean slice delivered in front of a ballroom full of strangers who didn't know me well enough to pretend they didn't hear it. My father, Thomas, looked away. My cousin, the family favorite, the one everyone adored and compared me to since childhood, blinked like she'd just won something. And I stood there, feeling every year of being the afterthought press quietly against my ribs. But I didn't flinch. I already knew what they didn't. 8 months earlier, I had a wedding too. Before I tell you what really happened, I have to tell you where you're listening from. People like to say families are complicated, but mine never felt complicated. It felt carefully choreographed. Every holiday photo, every graduation announcement, every glossy Christmas card mailed out to our extended relatives was centered around my cousin, Lila, the one everyone adored. I learned early that, in our house, love wasn't loud, it was selective. My name is Rachel Mercer, 31, a structural designer living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I build things meant to hold steady in storms, which is ironic considering how easily my own family let me slip through their fingers year after year. Growing up in Phoenix, I was the quiet child who colored in the margins while everyone clapped for the star performer beside me. Lila, 3 years younger, had a way of entering a room that made people straighten, not because she demanded attention, but because she absorbed it naturally. My parents followed that gravity without realizing they were doing it. I don't think they ever meant to make me feel small. They just didn't notice when they did. The memories that still catch in my chest aren't dramatic ones. They're tiny pinpricks, moments no one else remembers but that I still feel. A birthday where her cake had sparklers and edible gold dust while mine came from the grocery store. A school play where she got the lead role, and I was asked to help backstage because you're so reliable. A graduation dinner where my honor sash was barely acknowledged because Lila had just gone viral for a travel vlog. It wasn't cruelty. It was habit, and habits can cut just as deeply as intent. By the time I moved to Charlotte for work, I'd grown used to that quiet kind of loneliness, the one that doesn't come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who celebrate your existence only out of obligation. Then I met Jonah. Steady, observant, thoughtful, the kind of man who remembers how you take your tea without asking twice. Being with him felt like finally stepping into a world where showing up wasn't a performance, it was the default. When he proposed on a cliffside trail outside Asheville, just the two of us in the late afternoon light, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Chosen. Planning our small spring wedding felt right. Quiet, intentional, uncomplicated. I sent invitations to my parents and to Lila. Simple velvet boxes with handwritten notes tucked inside, hoping this time they'd show up not out of duty, but out of love. I wasn't asking for much, just 3 filled chairs. As the date approached, there were no excited phone calls, no questions about flights, no, "What can we bring?" But I convinced myself it didn't matter. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe, for once, I'd walk toward something and find them waiting for me. I was wrong. And the silence that followed that day, the 30 minutes standing at the front of the garden staring at 3 empty chairs, would echo louder than anything they'd ever said to me. The morning of my wedding smelled like wisteria and warm spring air, the kind of scent that usually settles my nerves. Friends bustled around the garden venue, tying silk ribbons to chairs and adjusting the simple arch Jonah and I had built together. His family arrived early, hugging me like they had been waiting their whole lives to welcome me. Everything felt soft, hopeful, beautiful, except the 3 chairs in the front row. They were marked with name cards I painted by hand. Mom, Dad, Lila. Nothing flashy, just small wooden signs with ivy curling around the edges. A quiet gesture, a place for them to belong in my moment. 10 o'clock came. Then 10:15. Guests settled into their seats, sending me sympathetic glances I pretended not to see. Jonah's mother whispered, "Maybe traffic's heavy this morning." Even though we both knew Phoenix to Charlotte wasn't a drive, it was a flight. I checked my phone. Nothing. At 23, Jonah squeezed my hands. "We can wait as long as you need." But I shook my head. No, if they were coming, they'd be here. I walked down the aisle alone, the wisteria scent turning sharp in my throat. Jonah's father stepped forward halfway, offering his arm when my steps faltered. I didn't realize until later how tightly I clung to him. After the ceremony, I tried one last time. I called, straight to voicemail. I texted, "We missed you today." Nothing. Hours later, just as the small reception ended, Lila finally answered. Her voice was bright, distracted, like she was doing her makeup while talking to me. "Oh," she said when I mentioned the wedding. "Was that today?" I signed for the invitation, I said quietly. A pause. Then that shrug in her tone. "I had a brand collab. You didn't expect me to cancel work for a backyard ceremony, did you?" Backyard. Like the vows I wrote by hand were a child's pretend game. Something fragile inside me tore, not loudly, but deeply. Over the next few weeks, my parents acted as if the wedding had been a minor scheduling conflict. My mother texted, "Hope it was lovely." My father forwarded me an article about Arizona real estate with no mention of the day they skipped. Lila posted a video captioned, "Some people will do anything for attention. Embarrassing." Each interaction felt like a small paper cut, harmless alone, devastating together. One night, while I sat at the kitchen table staring at the 3 untouched name cards, Jonah said softly, "Rachel, don't you still have access to the old security system? The cameras at your parents' house?" A spark lit in my chest. Painful, electric, undeniable. And for the first time since my wedding, I felt something other than hurt. I felt certainty. I logged into the system, scrolled to the week I sent the invitations. And there it was. Signature required. Recipient, Lila Mercer. The screen seemed to tighten around the name. I clicked the thumbnail. The footage loaded. And what I saw changed everything. The footage loaded in crisp, merciless clarity. There she was, Lila, hair piled in that familiar messy knot, leggings and a cropped sweatshirt, phone in one hand, the FedEx driver holding the velvet box in the other. She glanced at the label, her face folding into something that looked suspiciously like annoyance, then recognition. No hesitation, no check. She walked to the side of the porch where the recycling bins lived, lifted the lid, and dropped the velvet box inside as if it were junk mail. She glanced at her reflection in the black screen of her phone, smoothed the knot at the back of her head, and walked back inside, leaving the blue plastic sagging over a half-swallowed velvet box. I replayed it until the screen blurred, until the ache inside shifted from hurt to something steadier, like a plan finding its footing. I saved the clip, exported the logs, backed them up twice. Nothing more than necessary, just the facts they refused to give me. Then I closed the laptop and said the words I'd never pictured saying aloud. "I'm going to her wedding." Jonah didn't need to ask why. He already knew. The ballroom that night in downtown Charlotte looked like someone had inflated a fashion editorial into 3 dimensions. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over tables dressed in linens so white they seemed almost dishonest. Servers moved with the ease of practiced choreography, and the string quartet played pieces chosen for their soft, rich sadness. I stepped inside almost unnoticed, a shadow slipping into a room built for performance. Jonah squeezed my hand, gave me that small, wordless look that said, "This is yours," and then melted into the edge of the crowd so I would hold center if I needed to. We had agreed on this. It wasn't about spectacle or revenge. It was about truth claiming the space it deserved. Caroline moved from table to table, accepting compliments as if she were collecting currency. Thomas stood beside her, smiling the smile of someone used to being admired. Lila stood beneath an arch dripping with white flowers, the kind of arrangement people pay a fortune to recreate in magazines. Her smile was curated, perfect. She caught sight of me first. It was almost as if she measured the room and decided whether I would be a footnote. Her smile faltered, not with guilt, but with irritation, as if I'd arrived wearing the wrong color to her meticulously arranged party. "You came," she said through her teeth when I stepped into the receiving line. "I was invited." "Technically," she muttered, jaw working. "Sit toward the back," someone whispered. "The photographers are focusing on family." Family, right. Speeches began, toasts polished and bright, each one a breathless hymn to loyalty and sisterhood, and the way love binds people together. Each compliment floated through me like a paper boat in an ocean of irony. When Carolyn tapped her glass and the room stilled, the world narrowed to the electric present. "I want to say a few words to my daughters," she announced, and the syllables landed like small stones in a pond. That line, "When's your turn?" cut the quiet clean. My father looked at the floor. Lila's smile curved into something sharp. This time, I didn't shrink. My chair scraped the floor the way a small announcement does. The sound rippled through the crowd. Hundreds of heads turned toward me, and the air condensed into a brittle thing. "When's my turn?" I repeated softly, letting the question hang there before I answered it. 8 months ago. The hush was immediate, heavy enough to sit on. I let it settle before I continued. 8 months ago, I had a wedding, a small garden ceremony in Charlotte. You were invited. My mother's eyes flicked to me, confused like someone losing a script they'd recited their whole life. My father's face drained of color. Lila froze in a smile caught mid-blink. My voice held steady. "I never got anything from you." The technicians nearest the head table watched curiously. There was a large screen that had been showing rotating engagement photos all evening. I reached into my clutch for the tablet I'd prepared. The technician glanced at me, confused, and Jonah stepped to his side and offered a quick explanation. The screen cut to black. Lila began to shake her head, whispering, "Rachel, don't. Seriously, don't." But the video started anyway. Timestamp in the corner. The door cam angle. The FedEx driver ringing the bell. Lila opening the door in her casual outfit, signing for the package, taking the box, inspecting the label, a flicker of recognition crossing her face, and then that ordinary, casual indifference as she carried it to the bins and dropped it in the velvet box. The velvet box hung halfway in blue plastic, lid tipped, half swallowed, as ordinary as a discarded grocery flyer. The ballroom sound sank into silence. The footage froze on that frame. People gasped. A woman near the front covered her face. A man near the back muttered, "That's cold." "This isn't real," Lila stammered, hand shaking, petals from her bouquet crushed between her fingers. "You manipulated it," she said, but I shook my head. "It's raw footage," I told her. "The logs confirm the delivery. The signature confirms the receipt. The video shows what you did with it." My mother found her voice at last, brittle and circular. "Rachel, why didn't you tell us earlier?" "I did," I said quietly. "For 30 minutes on my wedding day, I told myself you might just be running late, that you'd walk in. For once, I wanted to be the one people were waiting for." My father suddenly stepped forward with a flash of anger. "You didn't call again. You didn't follow up." "I shouldn't have had to," I replied, the line sliding out of my mouth with the inevitability of gravity. "I shouldn't have had to beg you to be my parents." The groom, Lila's husband, stood beside her, pale and stunned. "Is this real?" he asked in a voice that trembled. Lila couldn't answer. She tried to frame it as out of context, but there is no context that turns a velvet box into a prop for neglect. Silence draped itself over the room like a heavy curtain. Then someone at the back clapped. One single, sharp clap that split the air. Others didn't join, but the intention sat undeniable. The groom lowered his head, eyes moving from his bride to the screen and then to the floor. "I need some air," he said, and walked away. Lila reached for his arm, "Please don't leave," but he stepped away as if a touch had burned him. My mother began to cry, reaching toward me as if she'd newly discovered that I had feelings that bled and bled alone. "Rachel," she whispered, "why would she do that?" I looked at her, not cruelly, not triumphantly, just plainly. "Because you taught her she could." There was nothing left to say. I placed the tablet gently on the table and stepped back from the spotlight her life had always claimed as hers. "The truth is enough," I said, and then I walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, the quartet faltered, uncertain whether the instrument should cradle a celebration or a funeral. I didn't look back. For the first time, I didn't need my family to follow. I had myself. Word travels faster than anyone imagines. Someone filmed the screen with the phone. By morning, the clip had flown out of the ballroom and across the internet like a bird startled into flight. I didn't post it. I didn't share it. I didn't answer a single message that day. The internet, mercifully impartial, told its own truth. By noon, the clip had millions of views, comment sections filled with strangers who recognized a kind of hurt I'd been carrying for years. Lila went silent for the first time in her influencer career. Brands paused partnerships, a few quietly severed relationships. Her follower count dipped like a tide pulling back. She issued a vague statement about family misunderstandings, but people had watched a velvet box slip into a recycling bin. The context needed no translation. Caroline called and Thomas emailed. Both danced awkwardly around apologies, never quite landing on the one word that matters. accountability. I answered none. There's a gulf between regret and responsibility, and I was no longer willing to translate the difference for anyone who refused to cross it. Jonah and I spent that New Year's with his family on the Puget Sound, in a small house with a deck heavy with snow. His mother handed me a mug of cocoa that warmed my hands in a way my family never had. "You're safe here, sweetheart," she said. And for the first time in a long time, I believed someone telling me that. Because safety isn't the absence of hurt. It's the presence of people who don't leave you to bleed alone. It's the people who check in not because they have to, but because they care. Life after the reveal wasn't a tidy revenge fairy tale. There were no dramatic confrontations, no cinematic showdowns, just the slow unpeeling of old habits and the steady building of new ones. Friends became family. Jonah's quiet, steady love stitched up the place inside me that had been pinched for years. I designed a table for Thanksgiving with his mother and brother, one that could see everyone we wanted at it. We filled it with people who showed up without being asked. If you've ever felt overlooked by the people who should have seen you first, know this: you don't have to ask to belong. Sometimes you have to make the table yourself. Sometimes truth is not a weapon, but a doorway. My life didn't end when my family didn't choose me. It finally began when I chose myself. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends, and leave a comment below with your perspective or the key lessons you took away.